The most pivotal moment in my gaming life came about because of the Wii. It's not something I could have anticipated, but it happened. My earliest memories are of playing the classic games of the past: Mario, Zelda, Contra, Donkey Kong, and many others. As the years went on, I kept playing them. Even though new games were coming out for the latest and more powerful consoles, these games remained great. As this style of gameplay started to decline in favor of new playstyles, so too did my interest in almost anything gaming. The energy that had shone so bright in my earlier years was now a faint glint. The Nintendo 64 and GameCube had focused on 3D games, but the latest Nintendo console would change that. The Wii moved forward by looking backward. Nintendo had just failed to win over the majority with the GameCube, not because GameCube games are bad, but because of some strange decisions. Nintendo had been on a roll with making questionable decisions for their console since the Nintendo 64. Instead of using optical media for their games, they stuck with cartridges, the same format that had brought them massive success in the past. This would ultimately cost them support from third parties that preferred the storage and price that CDs could offer. They also deviated from their tried and true controller design that is still influencing controllers today, going with the 3-prong controller. They were changing in some places and staying the same in others. This carried over to the GameCube. Some of the same decisions were made. They moved to a disc-based format for their games, but they were smaller and couldn't hold as much information. The controller had also been made with a different layout. Praised today, yes, but for the time, it contrasted against everything else on the market. The library of games was stellar and remain favorites even now, but the games weren't strong enough to make the GameCube a success. So what did Nintendo do next? How would they respond to what had just happened for 2 gaming generations? The games for those consoles are some of the best games ever made, one being heralded as the very best game in existence. Instead of trying to keep up with the competition making powerhouse gaming machines, Nintendo decided to look backward and make something completely different. They made the Wii. In contrast to the GameCube, the Wii was designed to look more modern and sleek, something that wouldn't look out of place next to the other entertainment boxes in the living room. It's thinner and was made to stand up or lie on its side, whatever the person buying it preferred. It doesn't have HDMI output. This seems out of place today, but back in 2006, flat panel TVs were just becoming a thing people were buying for their homes. Most households still relied on CRT TVs, so this wasn't that controversial of a decision. You could output in higher fidelity with component cables, though they weren't bundled in the box with the Wii, but you could buy them separately. Originally, all Wii models were backwards compatible with GameCube games. In fact, the Wii is basically an updated GameCube, making gameplay virtually identical to an actual GameCube. It has 2 removable doors that cover the controller ports and memory card slots. This added value to the console because it gave the Wii the ability to play more games. Through a hardware revision, Nintendo phased out the backwards compatibility and continued with only Wii game support. This version is known as the Family Edition. This brought the cost down, making it even more affordable later in its life. It was further revised with the Wii Mini. It deviates from the classic Wii modern look, going with an angular take. It's hyper-focused on being just a game console. All internet capabilities were removed. The game slot was changed to a door that needs to be opened to insert games, something similar to the PS1. It also only supports composite video, making it even less favorable for people who like to play on modern TVs. These features were cut to make the console more affordable, which it was. It has a unique design and extended the Wii's lifespan. The idea of the Wii has been praised by some and criticized by others. It's not a typical gaming console. It's based around one idea: movement. It's motion that controls the games. The amount of motion required to play games depends on which game you're playing. Wii Sports has you act out the movements of the sport you're playing, while games like Donkey Kong Country Returns uses motion to supplement certain button presses, allowing you to have a more traditional gameplay experience, with a small dose of the Wii splashed into the gameplay. The Wii Remote has a basic design, calling back to the NES featuring only 2 main face buttons. It also has a big A button, plus and minus buttons, along with a D-pad and Z button on the back. It also features an accelerometer and infrared detection sensors. These are used to sense motion. There's also the iconic nunchuck that is attached to the bottom of the Wii Remote. This gives it an analog stick with additional C and Z buttons on the front. This helps broaden what games can be played on the Wii. Motion proved to be one of the best decisions Nintendo ever took a chance on. It was wildly popular. Everyone at every age was interested in playing the Wii. Parents and grandparents were buying them, not only for their children and grandchildren, but for themselves. Its appeal was hard to look past. It didn't have the intimidating controllers of the other consoles. Games also appealed to a broader audience, being aimed more at a family experience, as opposed to the more mature titles the other two major consoles were known for. When the Wii came out, I didn't live in the United States. I had moved to Brazil and had fallen away from gaming. I was still interested in games like Halo and retro games from the Super Nintendo, NES, and Game Boy, but I didn't have access to them because I didn't bring any gaming consoles with me. Gaming news occasionally traveled down to me, which one time included the Wii. I didn't understand the concept of it. I kind of brushed it off as something weird Nintendo was up to again. To be honest, I was more interested in the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Even with those two, I didn't really care too much. I had moved on past that part of my life and was experiencing something completely different. After a few years, I moved back to the United States and eventually bought an Xbox 360, sort of tiptoeing my way back into gaming. I replayed the first two Halo games and for the first time, Halo 3. I loved it and thought I could get by with just an Xbox 360. This was until I was walking around in a store and saw a game that instantly made me rethink things. That game was Donkey Kong Country Returns. I wasn't even aware it was a thing. Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo had been my favorite game on the system. I played it non-stop growing up, and this game was labeled as a return to that world. I had to get a Wii and play it. Even if it was somewhat similar, that was all I really wanted from gaming at that time. Shooters were fun, but I wanted a new 2D platformer. So I picked up the Red Mario 25th Anniversary Edition Wii and Donkey Kong Country Returns. This was everything I could have asked for from a gaming console. It was this game that pulled on my desire to have a new addition to that classic game I love so much. It would have been great if the enemies were Kremlings, had more animal buddies, and featured snow and water levels, but I wasn't going to complain. Besides the added motion controls, it's a great game that really leans into being a giant throwback to the original Super Nintendo game. The best thing about buying the Red Special Edition Wii is that it came bundled with not one, but two games. I got Wii Sports, which I threw to the side, and New Super Mario Bros. Wii that I played right after Donkey Kong Country Returns. I was thrilled that there was also another 2D side-scrolling Mario game, and it's also great. After playing through New Super Mario Bros. Wii, I found where I had thrown Wii Sports and played it. This game is awesome and really sells what the Wii was about, getting up and immersing yourself into the gameplay. It has to be one of the greatest multiplayer games of all time. Another great multiplayer game is Mario Kart Wii. Again, I had taken a long break from gaming. Having all these games that were from a time when I was really into it was something I didn't think would ever happen. Yeah, there were Mario Kart games on the N64, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, and DS, but I skipped all those except Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Game Boy Advance, which is also a great game. Then I discovered that there was a new Punch-Out! All these games I loved during my childhood were all making a glorious comeback. After playing some of them, I felt like I had really underestimated and severely misjudged the console. Yeah, it wasn't the console for hardcore gamers. It was geared for the masses, and it delivered extremely fun games to play. Unknown to me for an embarrassingly long time, there was another side to the Wii, the Virtual Console. If I had known about the Virtual Console, I would have bought a Wii much earlier. When I heard about it, I thought it was someone trying to pull a prank on me or something. Until I went home, browsed through the menu to the Wii Shop channel, and there it was. This got me back into retro gaming. It may have kicked off the retro game explosion we're still seeing now. After playing all those throwback games, I wanted to play the originals. Now I could do that all in the same system. I was aware of emulation before the Virtual Console. I had played many games that way. However, this had it conveniently available on the Nintendo console sitting under my TV. Also, it was officially offered from Nintendo. I know this doesn't mean much to everyone, but I think it's important. It offered games from Nintendo's legendary consoles like the NES, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64, but also had games from other systems like the Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx-16, Neo Geo, and games from the arcade. It was surprising to see these systems represented on the Virtual Console. The Sega Genesis in particular was very unexpected. This is where I played my first Sega Genesis games, and it opened up a whole new world of games to explore. The majority of these classic games played really well, running at their original resolution. Past classics weren't the only games offered on the Virtual Console. WiiWare games were new games made to be distributed digitally. Some of those amazing entries were in the Rebirth series, where Konami made new entries in the Contra, Gradius, and Castlevania franchises. Again, taking a page from the past and making something new. The Wii revolutionized the way people looked at games. They weren't just for a niche group of people anymore. With its pleasing UI and easily understandable controls, it appealed to everyone. Not only that, but it even brought people back into gaming, me included. By focusing on games from the past and building on them, it attracted those that liked older games. The Wii made retro games accessible to everyone, expanding what could be played on the console. For me, the Wii, alongside the 3DS, are what made me come back to gaming. I hadn't thought much about Nintendo until the day I discovered that new Donkey Kong Country game. I'm glad that they focused on the past and gave us a 2D side-scroller renaissance. And in this way, the Wii moved Nintendo forward by looking backward.